And so I'd love to hear maybe some of the other advice that you usually give for people that have created a product they feel is amazing, but people aren't touching them.
Right. So there's a few big principles. So step number one is actually starting back with those internal triggers we talked about in Indistractable. When we build a habit forming product, we need to attach that product's use to a pain point, right? This is why we use every product and service. As we talked about earlier, the seat of human motivation is the desire to escape discomfort. So having a very clear psychological itch, not a functional need, right? Not, oh, my product needs to put together database software. No. What is the psychological need, right? What is that uncomfortable emotional state that every time they feel that emotion, your product or service is the solution to that problem. You're the salve for their itch. That's step number one. What is your trigger? Then you have the internal trigger. You also need the external trigger. What's the prompt that brings them to action? The next step of the hook is the action phase, and this is defined as the simplest behavior done in anticipation of a reward. That many people, as they design a product or service, they think that, hey, if the user knows what the service is, if they understand how great it is, then they'll use it. And that's not true. That in addition to the user having sufficient motivation, they also have to have sufficient ability. And this 9 times out of 10, when a service is not used or when a user doesn't do an intended behavior, it's not because they don't want to, it's because it's too difficult to do. And that difficulty creates what's called friction. And so friction can take the form of time, money, physical effort, cognitive load if something is difficult to understand. So it's your job to clear away as much of that friction as possible. And you can do that in all kinds of ways. The easy solution, but the most expensive, is to reduce the price, right? If you reduce the price of a product, you reduce the friction, you're more likely to increase ability and the action will occur. But of course, that's very expensive, right? That comes straight out of your bottom line. So there's all kinds of other things you can do to reduce friction, making the product easier to understand. You wouldn't believe, especially when it comes to software sales, many times people don't buy because it's just too complicated, right? Like, where do I click? What do I do? It's just too much information for them to take in. And so they say, it's okay. I'm just going to continue my day. I'm not going to buy. So that's, saving them time. Physical effort, if your product is some kind of physical product. Social deviance, this becomes a big one. People don't do a behavior if they don't see other people like them doing it. It's called mimetic desire, that almost everything we desire, everything we want, according to philosopher René Girard, comes from the fact that we see other people using it, right? So, is it valid for me to buy a product? Is there anybody like me using it? Of course, that's where we can use testimonials, but the closer those testimonials are to somebody I actually know or somebody who is like me, the more likely to be effective. So there's all kinds of psychological tools you can use to decrease friction to make the product something that people are more likely to use. Then the third step of the hook is the variable reward phase. And variable rewards are all about what's called an intermittent reinforcement, that we know that when we give people what they want, when we give them a reward on a predictable schedule, it's something that they can rely upon, but it's not typically something that will create a habit. It doesn't create repeat engagement. When there's some kind of variability, some kind of surprise in a product, if you think about, why do people day trade stocks? Not to offend anyone, but day trading is one of the best ways to lose money. It's not a good financial strategy. Best financial strategy, according to years and years of research, unless you've got some insider information, the best thing you can do is put your money and go away, right? Don't touch, put it in the S&P or put it in some mutual fund. You're not going to get rich day trading unless you've got some insider information, which is typically illegal. But why do people love playing the markets? Because it's this slot machine. It's this variable reward of going up and down and trying to control something that's uncontrollable. When you think about what makes sports fun to watch, why do we like a ball bouncing around a court or a pitch? It's uncertainty about who might win. What makes a book fun to read or a movie fun to watch? It's because there's variability about what's going to happen at the end. So some bit of uncertainty, some kind of excitement, some kind of variability is at the core of all sorts of habit-forming products, whether it's scrolling a feed, whether it's pulling on a slot machine, same psychological phenomenon of variable reinforcement. And then finally, there's that investment phase, which we talked about a little bit before, where the more the product is used, the better it becomes. It increases in value. It should appreciate, not depreciate, appreciate with value the more it's used. So the more data I give to a product, the more connections I have, the higher my reputation, for example. Anything that makes the product better and better the more I use it makes me more likely to come back in the future. So it's through successive cycles through these hooks, trigger, action, reward, and investment. This is how our preferences are shaped and how our tastes are formed.
Wow. I love it because it's been I think it's been 6 years since we had our first conversation going through this product. It's things that have embedded and now it's being refreshed. And I think for anybody who's out there building any kind of business, these are such powerful things to keep in mind in the product design, in your sales process design. And not all of them are as intuitive to use. Like the variable reward might be something that's a bit more difficult to engineer if you're not designing particularly a SaaS product. But I do feel that this thing around putting in data has been the major trend that I've seen for a lot of people that are building, online businesses around educating and bringing people together and solving problems. Why the community aspect seems to be one of the biggest things.
That investment phase, it's always been important. It's always been a critical part of the Hook model. But since I wrote Hooked, the ChatGPT is a phenomenon that we've only seen in the last few months. So with the rise of large language models like ChatGPT, the investment phase is going to become incredibly important. So all kinds of products of the future, the ones that are going to dominate their markets, it's not going to be optional anymore to not customize the service. The fact that now we can plug our product into a large language model like ChatGPT means that very quickly there'll be no excuse to not customize every service to a market of one. Right? Because now I know, it's Jason who came to my website. It's Jason who came to use my service. How can I customize the product based on his past data so that the product is better now that he's come back to use it? And so now that's possible in a way it's never been possible before.